My name is Hazel. I am 32 years old, and I live in a quiet suburb near Seattle. I stood in the crowded hallway of the county courthouse. My hands were cold, but my mind was perfectly clear. Kevin, my husband of 7 years, leaned in close to my ear. He didn't want the lawyers or the strangers around us to hear. He wanted this poison to be just for me. "I'll take everything from you, Hazel," he whispered. His voice was low and nasty. "Today is the best day of my life, because it's the day I finally leave you with nothing." He pulled back and looked at me. He was smiling. Behind him stood Sophie. She was younger than me, wearing a bright red dress that looked wrong for a serious place like this. She smiled too, like the ending of our story was already written, and she had won. Kevin expected me to cry. He expected me to beg him for mercy or scream at him in front of everyone. That's what he thought I would do. But I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. Kevin thought my silence was fear. He didn't know I'd been preparing for this moment for 6 months. He didn't know about the thick folder in my bag. He thought he was the hunter. He had no idea he was actually the prey. But before I tell you how everything flipped, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Kevin pulled away from my ear. He stood up straight and adjusted his expensive suit jacket. He'd bought that suit 3 months ago. He told me it was an investment for a big client meeting. I knew now who the client was. He looked down at me. I was sitting on a hard wooden bench outside the courtroom doors. I felt small. I have always been a small woman, but Kevin knew how to make me feel invisible. "Cat got your tongue, Hazel?" he asked, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. He wanted an audience. He wanted everyone to see him as the strong, confident man leaving his weak wife. I looked up at him. His face was handsome, the same face I fell in love with 8 years ago, but his eyes were hard. There was no kindness left in them for me. I didn't answer. I just folded my hands in my lap. My knuckles were white, but my face was calm. I'd practiced that face in the bathroom mirror that morning. "Do not let him see you shake. Do not let him see the crack in your heart." Kevin laughed, a short, cruel sound. "Look at her," he said to Sophie, standing just behind his shoulder. "She's terrified. She knows she's done for." Sophie giggled, a light, airy sound that didn't belong in that heavy hallway. She looked at me like I was something sad by the side of the road. "Don't be too mean, Kevin," Sophie said, her voice fake sweet, meant for the lawyers walking by. I saw the smirk she gave me when Kevin wasn't looking. She was wearing a gold bracelet. I recognized it instantly, the first piece of evidence I'd found. Seeing it on her wrist felt like a physical punch, but I didn't react. I breathed in slow. I breathed out slow. Kevin's lawyer arrived, a loud man with a shiny briefcase. He shook Kevin's hand vigorously. "Ready to wrap this up?" "More than ready," Kevin said, clapping his lawyer on the back. "Let's finish it. Hazel's ready to sign whatever we put in front of her. Aren't you, honey?" He used the pet name like a weapon, trying to bait me. He wanted me to snap, to cause a scene, so he could point his finger and say, "See, she's crazy. She's emotional." I stayed silent. I kept my eyes on the scuffed floor tiles. My silence began to bother him. He stopped laughing. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He checked his watch 3 times in 1 minute. Kevin was used to me fixing things. Throughout our marriage, if he was mad, I apologized. If he was worried, I comforted him. If he was yelling, I calmed him down. I was always the one reacting to his moods. Now I wasn't reacting at all. I was a stone wall. He leaned down again, his voice a tight hiss. "Say something, damn it. Stop looking like a kicked puppy. It's pathetic." I lifted my chin and met his eyes. I didn't blink. I didn't frown. I just looked at him with total emptiness. "We're due in court, Kevin," I said. My voice was soft but steady. It didn't shake. That was all I said. He blinked, confused. He'd expected fear, and I'd given him nothing. "Yeah, we are," he muttered, straightening up, but some of the swagger had left his shoulders. He glanced back at Sophie, almost needing reassurance. She gave him a quick, tight smile, but she looked uneasy too. They didn't understand what was happening. They thought my silence was weakness, that I was frozen with terror because they were about to take my home, my savings, my future. They were wrong. My silence wasn't fear. It was focus. I was holding all the noise inside me, the anger, the hurt, the betrayal, screaming inside my chest. But I wouldn't let it out. Not here. Not in front of him. He needed my reaction to feel powerful. By giving him silence, I was taking his power away before we even stepped into the courtroom. He just didn't realize it yet. The bailiff opened the heavy oak doors. "All parties for Bennett versus Bennett," he called out. Kevin took a deep breath and puffed out his chest. He grabbed Sophie's hand for a second, then let go, and they walked toward the door. He looked back at me one last time with a sneer. I stood up slowly. I picked up my large tote bag. It was heavy with paper. It contained the truth about our marriage. I walked in behind them, alone. An overwhelming sadness washed over me. A wave so big I thought I might drown in it right there in the hallway. This was the end of the life I thought I was building. But then I felt the weight of the bag in my hand, the evidence, the proof. I wasn't just a victim walking to the slaughter. I had a weapon of my own. I took a deep breath, pushed the sadness down into my stomach, and followed my husband into the room where I was going to end his lies. To understand why Kevin thought he could crush me, you have to understand who I was in our marriage. I've never been the loudest person in the room. Even as a child, I was the quiet one in the corner, reading a book or organizing my toys in neat rows. I didn't need to be the center of attention. I liked order. I liked things to make sense. When I met Kevin, he was everything I wasn't. Loud, funny, full of big energy. He walked into a party, and everyone looked at him. He could charm anyone. He charmed me right away. I thought we were a good balance. He provided the excitement, and I provided the foundation. In the beginning, he appreciated it. He called me his rock. He said he'd be lost without me keeping his life together. And he was right. He would have been. Kevin was terrible with details. He forgot bill due dates. He double-booked appointments. He spent money without thinking about tomorrow. I took over everything. I was happy to do it. I thought that's what a good wife did. Every Sunday night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and a calculator. I paid the mortgage, the electric bill, the car payments, the insurance. I balanced our checking account down to the last penny. I built spreadsheets for our savings goals. A bigger house one day, maybe children someday. I tracked every dollar we put aside for those dreams. Kevin never saw those spreadsheets. He never asked about the bank accounts unless he wanted to buy something big. "Hey, Hayes," he'd say, using his nickname for me. "Can we afford this trip to Vegas with the guys?" I'd look at the budget. I'd move things around. I'd sacrifice something I wanted, a new winter coat, a weekend getaway for just the two of us, so I could say yes to him. "Yes, Kevin, we can afford it." He'd kiss my cheek. "You're the best, babe." Then he'd pack his bag and leave me home alone for the weekend. Over the years, the appreciation stopped. My work became invisible to him. He expected the bills paid, clean clothes in the closet, food in the fridge. He expected his life to run smoothly without lifting a finger. He started seeing my quiet nature not as strength, but as dullness. "You need to loosen up, Hazel," he'd say when I wanted to stay in on a Friday night after a long week. I had a job too, as a data manager for a logistics company. It was demanding. I was tired. "You're always so serious," he said. "It's boring." That word hurt more than anything. Boring? I wasn't boring. I was responsible. I was keeping a roof over our heads while he was out networking at bars until 2 in the morning. He saw himself as the great provider because his paycheck was bigger than mine. He liked to brag about his commissions. "I had a killer month, Hazel," he'd say, throwing his suit jacket on the chair I'd just tidied. "Dinner's on me tonight. Let's go somewhere expensive." He didn't know his killer month barely covered the credit card debt he'd racked up the month before on golf outings and fancy lunches. I moved money from savings to cover his spending so he wouldn't feel embarrassed. I protected his ego. I made myself smaller so he could feel bigger. He mistook my competence for simple helpfulness. He thought anyone could do what I did. He thought I was just his assistant at home, someone to handle the boring stuff while he lived the real life. He forgot I was the one who knew where every dollar went. He forgot I had the passwords to everything. He forgot my quiet brain was like a steel trap, remembering dates, numbers, promises. He saw a mouse. He didn't see the person holding the keys to his entire existence. When he decided to leave me for Sophie, someone louder, shinier, less boring, he thought I'd just fade away. He thought he could tell his lawyer to give me the minimum, and I'd accept it because I was too weak to fight. He thought the person who built the foundation of his life wouldn't know how to tear it down. It was the biggest mistake of his life, and it all started with a simple slip-up, one my quiet, organized brain caught immediately. The end of my marriage didn't start with a dramatic scream or a slamming door. It started on a Tuesday evening in November. It was raining hard outside, a cold, miserable rain tapping against the kitchen windows. I was making lasagna, Kevin's favorite, simmering the sauce for hours the way he liked it. I was trying. Things had been distant between us for months. He was working late more often. He was snapping at me over small things. I thought if I made his favorite dinner, maybe we could sit down and talk. Maybe we could reconnect. I heard the garage door open around 7. I felt that familiar jump in my stomach, half anticipation, half anxiety, wondering which Kevin would walk through that door tonight. The charming husband, or the cold stranger. He came in through the mudroom, shaking rain off his expensive wool coat. "Hey," he said, not looking at me. He seemed distracted, buzzing with a strange energy. Not angry, that was a relief, but not warm either. His mind seemed somewhere else entirely. "Hi, honey. Dinner's almost ready. It's lasagna." "Oh, sounds good," he said, already walking toward the stairs. "I need to shower first. I feel gross from the travel." He'd been away for 3 days on a business trip to Chicago. At least that's what he told me. "Okay, don't take too long," I called after him. I turned off the oven and walked into the mudroom where he'd hung his coat. It was soaking wet. If it dried like that, it would smell musty. I took it off the hook to hang it near the radiator. That's who I was, always taking care of the little things for him. As I moved the coat, I felt something stiff in the inside pocket. A piece of paper. I didn't think anything of it. Kevin was always shoving receipts in his pockets and forgetting them. Part of my routine was emptying his pockets before the dry cleaner, so he wouldn't lose anything important. I pulled the damp paper from the silky lining. It was a receipt. I started to crumple it up to toss it, but the logo at the top caught my eye. Not gas, not a business dinner. A fancy script logo. Adler's Fine Jewelry. I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. Adler's was the most expensive jewelry store in the city. Kevin had never bought me anything from there. Our wedding rings came from a modest chain store in the mall. I smoothed the damp paper on the mudroom bench and stared at the numbers. The total at the bottom was $5,250. My hands started to shake. A cold chill spread through my chest. What did he buy for over $5,000? I looked at the item description. 18K gold diamond tennis bracelet. I looked down at my own wrist. Bare, except for my practical watch. Maybe it was for me. Our anniversary was coming up in 2 months. Maybe he was planning way ahead. But Kevin never planned ahead. He was a last-minute shopper, usually grabbing me a gift card the day of. Then my eyes moved to the date and time at the top of the receipt. Date: November 14th. Time: 1:45 p.m. Location: Adler's Fine Jewelry, downtown branch. November 14th was yesterday. Yesterday, at 1:45 p.m., Kevin was supposed to be in Chicago. He'd told me he was in all-day meetings with a difficult client. He'd told me he was swamped. I stared at that date. The numbers seemed to burn into my eyes. If he was in Chicago, how was he buying a $5,000 bracelet in our city at lunchtime on a Monday? The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The smell of lasagna from the kitchen suddenly made me feel sick. The sound of the shower running upstairs felt distant. Everything I thought I knew about my life cracked. a hairline fracture, thin and sharp. I wasn't sad yet. I was in shock. My organized, logical brain tried to find a reason. Maybe the date was wrong. Maybe this was an online confirmation. But deep in the pit of my stomach, I knew. He wasn't in Chicago. He was here, buying diamond jewelry that wasn't for me. I heard the water turn off upstairs. He'd be coming down soon, smelling like soap, expecting his favorite dinner, ready to sit across from me and lie about his trip. I folded the damp receipt carefully. I didn't put it back in his pocket. I put it in my own jeans. It felt hot against my thigh. I walked back into the kitchen, numb, a ghost in my own house. I served the lasagna. I sat down across from my husband. How were the meetings in Chicago? My voice sounded normal. It amazed me that it could, when my world was falling apart. He took a big bite. Grueling, he sighed. Those guys are tough. We were stuck in a conference room for 10 hours yesterday. Barely saw daylight. He looked me right in the eyes when he said it. He lied so easily. It was terrifying. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the man I loved, and a stranger who could betray me without blinking. That receipt in my pocket was the first crack. And now that I knew it was there, I knew the whole foundation was about to crumble. Dinner was agony. Every word Kevin said felt like another lie piling onto the table between us. I pushed my food around my plate, my stomach twisted into knots. "You're not hungry?" he asked, shoveling a second helping onto his plate. "Just tired," I said quietly. He didn't press it. He didn't really care. He talked about work, about the imaginary Chicago trip, adding details I now knew were total fiction. The bad coffee, how tired he was of travel. I listened. I nodded. I played the supportive wife. But inside, a cold, hard clarity was taking over. I needed proof. The receipt was a smoking gun, but I needed to see the bullet. After dinner, he went to the living room to watch a basketball game. "I'm just gonna zone out for a bit, hun." "Okay, I have some work to catch up on," I said. It was the perfect excuse. He never questioned me working on my laptop. I went into our home office and closed the door. I sat at my desk, hands steady now. The shock had worn off, replaced by grim determination. I opened a private browser window and started with Facebook. Kevin wasn't very active there, nothing suspicious. I moved to Instagram, which he used more, following athletes, car accounts, business contacts. I scrolled through his following list, hundreds of accounts, looking for anything that stood out. Then I saw it near the top of his recently followed list, Sophie G. Designs. A tiny profile picture, a flash of blonde hair, a bright smile. My heart gave a painful thud. I clicked on the name. Her profile was public. She wanted to be seen. Her bio read, interior designer, city girl, lover of beautiful things. I scrolled through her photos, expensive lattes, designer shoes, hotel lobbies. I scrolled back to yesterday, November 14th. There it was. A photo posted around 6 p.m., a close-up of her hand holding a glass of champagne, the background blurred, but it looked like a fancy hotel bar with velvet chairs and dim lighting. On her wrist was a bracelet, unmistakable, an 18K gold tennis bracelet, small diamonds catching the light. Brand new. I leaned closer to the screen, eyes burning. It was the bracelet from the receipt, the one Kevin bought while he was supposedly in meetings in Chicago. The caption read, "Champagne Tuesdays and sparkly new things, spoiled by the best guy. Blessed, #date night. The best guy." A physical sickness rose in my throat. I had to swallow hard to keep from gagging. He wasn't just having a fling. This wasn't a one-night mistake on a lonely business trip. He was dating her, taking her out on date nights in our own city while I was home making his favorite lasagna and worrying about his stressful week. Her friends were gushing in the comments. "OMG, Sophie, it's gorgeous. Who's the mystery man?" Sophie replied with winking emojis and heart emojis. She was loving the attention. I kept scrolling through her feed, seeing other clues now that I knew what to look for. A photo from 2 weeks ago, 2 dinners at an expensive steakhouse, Kevin's favorite. A picture from a month ago showing the interior of a luxury car that looked exactly like his BMW. The pieces clicked together. This had been going on for weeks, maybe months. While I was balancing our budget and moving money to cover his credit cards, he was spending thousands on this girl. I didn't cry. I sat there in the quiet office, the blue light of the laptop illuminating my face, and I felt absolutely nothing but cold reality. The grief would come later. I knew heartbreak would arrive and try to drown me. But right then, I was in survival mode. The organized part of my brain took over completely. I didn't close the tab. I started taking screenshots. The bracelet, the caption, the date and time, the dinner photos, the car photo. I saved everything into a new folder on my desktop, named simply Proof. I had the receipt in my pocket. I had the photos on my computer. It was confirmed. My marriage was a lie. I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked into the living room. Kevin was laughing at something on TV, relaxed, happy. He had no idea his entire world had just shifted. "Done with work?" he asked, not looking away from the screen. "Yes," I said. "I'm done." He didn't hear the double meaning. "I'm going up to bed." "Okay, babe. I'll be up soon." I walked up the stairs to the bedroom we'd shared for 7 years, into the closet, and looked at his clothes, at the life we'd built. It was all tainted now. Every memory felt dirty. I changed into my pajamas and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't confront him yet, not with just a receipt and some Instagram photos. If I confronted him now, he'd lie. He'd gaslight me. He'd say I was crazy, paranoid. He'd hide his tracks better. I needed more. I needed to know how deep this went. I needed to know how much of our money he'd spent on her. I needed undeniable proof that would stand up in court. Kevin thought I was weak. He thought I was stupid. He was about to find out just how dangerous a quiet, organized woman could be. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I began to plan. The next morning, Kevin left for work as usual. He kissed my cheek and told me he had a busy day ahead. I smiled and told him to drive safely. It was the first lie I'd told him in 7 years. It felt surprisingly easy. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I went to work. I called in sick to my own job. I had more important work to do. I sat at the kitchen table with a pot of coffee and my laptop and opened a new spreadsheet. I named the file simply Balance. I'd always handled our finances. Kevin liked it that way. He didn't want to think about bills or savings, just swipe his card and have it work. Because of this, I had access to everything. Passwords, PINs, account history, all of it in my head or saved on my secure drive. I started with the joint checking account, pulling 12 months of statements, going through them line by line. I found the obvious things first: cash withdrawals, 200 here, 300 there. Small at first, about 6 months ago, then bigger. Then I found the transfers to an account I didn't recognize, labeled consulting in the notes. Kevin didn't have a consulting business. He was a sales director. I traced the account number to an online bank, the kind that's easy to set up. I used his social security number, which I knew by heart, to reset the password and log in. It wasn't a business account. It was a slush fund. He'd been draining money from our joint savings, money we were saving for a bigger house, for a future baby, into this private account. From there, the money flowed out like water. Venmo payments to Sophie G Designs, labeled rent help and car payment. My stomach turned. He wasn't just buying her dinner. He was supporting her, paying her apartment, while I was clipping coupons to save on groceries. I entered every stolen dollar into my spreadsheet. October 4th, $1,200 transferred to external account. October 12th, $350 steakhouse dinner, Sophie's birthday. October 15th, $800 weekend hotel stay, claimed as a business trip. The numbers added up fast. In just 6 months, he'd drained nearly $25,000 from our shared life. Then I found something worse. I looked at our investment account, the one holding my inheritance. My grandmother had left me $5,000 when she passed 3 years ago. I'd put it away for a rainy day. I'd told Kevin it was our safety net. I logged in. Balance zero. I refreshed the page, hoping it was a mistake. Balance zero. I clicked on the transaction history. 3 months ago, a withdrawal for the full amount, $50,000. Where did it go? I traced it to a title company. He'd used my grandmother's money she'd saved her whole life to give me, as a down payment on a condo. I searched the address on the county property records website. Owner, Kevin Bennett. He'd bought a condo, smart enough not to put Sophie's name on it, but using my money to buy a bachelor pad for himself and his mistress. I sat back in my chair. The house was silent. This wasn't just cheating. This was theft. This was financial abuse. He'd looked me in the eye every day for 3 months, knowing he'd stolen my inheritance. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the coffee mug against the wall. I typed. August 20th, $5,000 unauthorized withdrawal. Down payment on condominium at 400 River Street. I documented everything, downloaded every statement, printed every transaction receipt. I built a paper trail so thick and so detailed he'd never be able to deny it. By the time the sun went down, I had a complete picture of his betrayal. He thought he was clever. He thought I was just the boring wife who paid the electric bill. He forgot I was a professional data manager. He forgot that numbers are my language, and the numbers were telling a story that was going to destroy him. For the next 4 weeks, I lived a double life. To Kevin, I was the same Hazel as always. I cooked his dinner, I washed his clothes, I listened to him complain about his boss. I even asked about his business trips with a smile, nodding while he lied to my face. It was exhausting. Every time he touched me, I wanted to flinch. Every time he called me babe, I wanted to vomit. But I had to be patient. One night in the kitchen, he was looking at his phone, smiling at a text. I knew it was from her. "Who's that?" I asked casually, wiping down the counter. He jumped a little. "Oh, just Dave from the office sending a funny meme." "That's nice," I said, turning my back so he couldn't see my eyes. They were cold. I was gathering the final pieces of the puzzle. I needed to know about his debts. Kevin liked to gamble occasionally, a casino trip with friends, maybe twice a year. But digging deeper into the credit card statements, I found charges for online betting sites, DraftKings, FanDuel, PokerStars. He was losing money, a lot of it, chasing his losses. Lose 1,000, bet 2,000 to win it back. He was spiraling. That explained why he'd stolen my inheritance. He wasn't just funding Sophie. He was covering his own mess. He was desperate. I added it to the file. Gambling losses, year to date, $18,500. I also discovered he hadn't paid the mortgage in 2 months. He'd been intercepting the mail so I wouldn't see the late notices, telling me he was handling it online. He was setting me up to lose everything. If I hadn't looked, we'd have gone into foreclosure while he moved into his new condo with Sophie. The betrayal was total. He wasn't just leaving me. He was trying to ruin me on his way out. That realization killed the last bit of love I had for him. There was no sadness left, only a cold, hard need for justice. I started moving my own pieces on the board. I opened a new bank account at a different bank, one he didn't know about, and started routing my paycheck there. I contacted the credit card companies and removed my name from the joint cards. I froze my credit so he couldn't open new loans in my name. I made copies of his passport, his driver's license, his social security card. I photographed the expensive watches he'd bought with our money, his golf clubs. I cataloged every asset we owned, all while he slept next to me, snoring peacefully, dreaming of his new life. He thought he was the main character of this story. He thought I was just an extra, a background character who'd fade away when he was done with me. He didn't know the background character was rewriting the script. By the end of the month, I was ready. I had the file. I had the evidence. I had the rage packed down into a tight, heavy ball in my chest. It was time to get a lawyer. I didn't pick one off a billboard. I did my research and found Harold Whitman, a divorce attorney who specialized in financial fraud. His office wasn't fancy, a quiet brick building downtown that smelled like old paper and coffee. Harold was an older man with wire-rimmed glasses and a calm voice. He didn't look like a shark. He looked like a librarian. That was exactly what I wanted. I sat in his office and placed my binder on his desk. It was 3 inches thick. "What is this?" Harold asked. "This is everything," I said. "Bank statements, property records, proof of adultery, proof of theft, proof of gambling debts." Harold opened the binder, flipped through the pages, adjusted his glasses, and read for 10 minutes without saying a word. When he finally looked up, there was a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "You did all this yourself?" "Yes." "Hazel," he said, leaning back. "Most people come in here crying, with no idea what their spouse owns or owes. You've just done 90% of my job for me." "I want everything back, Harold. I don't care about the marriage. He can have the divorce. But I want my grandmother's money back. I want the house. I want him to pay for what he stole." Harold nodded. "We can do that, but we have to be smart, strategic." "What do you suggest?" "We let him think he's winning," Harold said. He explained the plan, a strategy called sandbagging. We'd file for divorce but keep the petition vague. No mention of the fraud, the condo, or Sophie. We'd let Kevin believe I was just a sad, heartbroken woman who wanted out. We'd let him get confident. We'd let him come to the settlement conference thinking he could bully me into a bad deal. "If he thinks you know nothing, he'll be sloppy," Harold said. "He'll lie on his financial disclosure forms. He'll hide assets. And once he lies to the court under oath, we drop this binder on the table. And then? Then the judge destroys him." "I like this plan," I said. "It fits me. It's quiet. It's precise. Do it." 2 days later, Kevin was served with the divorce papers at work. He came home storming, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. "What is this, Hazel?" he screamed, waving the papers in my face. I was sitting on the couch reading a book. I marked my page carefully before looking up. "It's a divorce, Kevin. I know about Sophie." I kept it simple. No mention of the money, no mention of the condo. He stopped yelling, surprised, then relieved, and let out a laugh. "Oh, you know. Well, that makes this easier." He sat down in the armchair, crossing his legs, arrogance returning instantly. "Look, Hazel, I was going to tell you anyway. Sophie and I, we're in love. She understands me. We have a connection I never had with you." "Okay. I'm not going to be the bad guy here," he said, leaning forward. "But let's be realistic. You can't afford this house on your own. I've been carrying us for years." It took every ounce of strength not to laugh in his face. Carrying us, he hadn't paid the mortgage in 2 months. "I have a lawyer," he continued. "A shark. If you try to fight me, Hazel, I'll crush you. I'll make sure you walk away with nothing. So just sign what I give you, and we can end this." "I have a lawyer too," I said softly. He sneered. "Who? Some strip mall guy?" "Just a lawyer." "Fine," Kevin said, standing up. "Do it the hard way. But don't come crying to me when you're living in a studio apartment." He went upstairs to pack a bag. He moved out that night, straight into the condo bought with my grandmother's money. I locked the door behind him and slid the deadbolt into place. The game was on. The day of the final hearing arrived. This brings us back to the moment in the hallway. Kevin whispering in my ear, Sophie in her red dress, the promise that he'd take everything. We walked into the courtroom. It was quiet and cold. Judge Reynolds, a stern woman, sat high on the bench. Kevin's lawyer, the loud man with the shiny briefcase, stood up first. "Your Honor," he boomed, "my client, Mr. Bennett, has been the sole provider for this marriage. He's requesting the sale of the marital home. He's generous enough to offer Mrs. Bennett a small settlement, but we deny any request for alimony. The marriage has simply run its course." Kevin sat there nodding, looking smug. He'd submitted his financial disclosure form. He'd listed the house. He'd listed the car. He had not listed the condo. He had not listed the online bank account. He had not listed the gambling debts. He'd lied under oath, just like Harold said he would. Judge Reynolds looked at Harold. "Mr. Whitman, does your client agree to these terms?" Harold stood slowly, adjusting his glasses. No, Your Honor, we do not. Kevin rolled his eyes. Sophie sighed loudly from the gallery. We believe Mr. Bennett's financial disclosure is incomplete, Harold said politely. Incomplete? Kevin's lawyer scoffed. My client has been fully transparent. If I may. Harold picked up the heavy binder, walked to the front, and handed a copy to the judge and a copy to Kevin's lawyer. Exhibit A, bank records showing the transfer of $50,000 of Mrs. Bennett's separate inheritance into an account solely controlled by Mr. Bennett. Kevin froze. He stopped slouching and sat up very straight. Exhibit B, property records for a condominium at 400 River Street, purchased in Mr. Bennett's name using those stolen funds. This asset was not disclosed on his financial affidavit. The room went silent. The judge flipped through the pages, her face growing dark. Exhibit C, credit card statements showing over $20,000 spent on luxury items, travel, and payments to a Miss Sophie Greer. Harold gestured toward Sophie. Everyone turned to look at her. She shrank in her seat, face burning red. And finally, Exhibit D, records of $18,500 in gambling losses, funded by marital assets. Kevin was pale now, like he might be sick. He looked at his own lawyer, who was reading the binder with a look of horror. His lawyer realized his client had lied to him too. Mr. Bennett, Judge Reynolds said, her voice like ice. Is this true? Kevin stammered. I can explain. I was going to pay it back. You swore under oath that you disclosed all assets, the judge snapped. You committed perjury in my courtroom. Kevin's lawyer tried to stand. Your Honor. Sit down. She looked back at Kevin. You have dissipated marital assets to fund an affair and a gambling addiction. You have stolen from your wife's inheritance, and you have lied to this court. Kevin looked at me. For the first time, he really saw me. He didn't see the weak, boring wife. He saw the woman who had documented every single lie. He saw the precision. He saw the competence. He saw that he had lost. I looked back at him. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched him crumble. I am invalidating the previous settlement offer, Judge Reynolds said. The condominium is marital property, to be awarded immediately to Mrs. Bennett to repay the stolen inheritance. The marital home will be awarded to Mrs. Bennett. Mr. Bennett, you will assume full responsibility for all gambling debts and credit card debts solely in your name. Kevin's mouth fell open. But that's everything. I'll have nothing. You should have thought of that before you stole from your wife. Court adjourned. The gavel banged. It was the best sound I had ever heard. Kevin sat in his chair, stunned, ruined. No house, no condo, massive debt. I stood and gathered my things, walking past his table. Hazel, he whispered, desperate. Please, we can talk about this. I don't have anywhere to go. I stopped. I looked at him one last time. You're a provider, Kevin, I said calmly. I'm sure you'll figure it out. I walked out of the courtroom. In the hallway, Sophie was waiting. She wasn't smiling anymore. She looked furious. You took the condo? She hissed. That was supposed to be our place. It was bought with my grandmother's money, I said. It was never yours. And by the way, Kevin is broke. About $40,000 in debt and no assets. Good luck with that. Sophie's eyes went wide. She looked at the courtroom door where Kevin was still sitting, then at the exit. She didn't wait for him. She turned on her heel and walked out. She was done. The money was gone, so she was gone. I walked out of the courthouse alone. The sun was shining. The air felt fresh and clean. I got into my car, put my hands on the steering wheel, and waited for the tears. I thought I'd feel a massive release of emotion. Instead, I just felt light. The heavy weight of the last 7 years was gone. The weight of managing Kevin's life, of hiding his flaws, of making myself small so he could feel big. All of it, gone. I had my house. I had my grandmother's money back, in the form of a condo I'd sell. I had my dignity. I drove home. The house was quiet. Mine. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the table where I used to pay the bills. I opened my laptop, opened the file named Balance, and looked at the final column. A positive net worth. Freedom. I closed the file and dragged it to the trash. I didn't need to track the lies anymore. The account was settled. I took a sip of tea and looked out at the garden. It had been neglected a long time, just like the weeds in the backyard. But now I had time. I had resources. I could grow whatever I wanted. Kevin wanted to take everything from me. In the end, he only took the burden of being his wife, and he gave me back myself. That was the best trade I ever made. Thank you for reading my story. If you've ever had to be the strong one in silence, if you believe the truth always comes out in the end, like this video and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, do you think Kevin deserved what he got? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay strong.